How's it going, Andrew?
What's going on, Matt?
Not much. Enjoying a wifeless evening.
Same.
Unfortunately, I still have a kid.
Same. Yeah, Matt and I's wives are at our lodge did a ladies' night out where instead of dragging the ladies to a Masonic event like we like to do most of the time, we instead had them plan an event and go do something without us. So a lot of us brothers are on baby duty or kid duty tonight.
Right. Though, we talked to our ladies about it, and, we had traditionally done that sweethearts dinner, and I think this was a better option because they were like, I don't want to go to another event where you're just going to hang out with the dudes. Like, give us like a night out instead. And I was like, that's actually reasonable. I like that idea.
Well, in the last two ladies' nights that we tried to plan, either were really poorly attended or they just didn't even meet the minimum. So clearly there was something not going correctly. You know what I mean? Like people weren't interested in it. And I think it made sense where it's like, all because you make it a night for the ladies, it's still just an event at lodge that you're dragging me to, right? Or an event at a place with Masons. It's another Masonic event.
Right. Or a dinner with a bunch of Masons, which, we do all the time. So like, yeah, it made sense. Like, let us go out and do our thing without you guys, and you guys hold down the fort. That's how you could really appreciate us. I was like, that actually makes sense.
That's because that's what we have them do all the time when we're running off at Masonic events. So it's a bit of a role swappy.
Right, exactly. I liked it, and I'm pretty sure it sounded like it was going to be well attended. So
yeah, sounds like they're having fun. How was hunting? I made fun of you last episode, as you heard, and saw a turkey in my yard.
You did, yeah. Good for you. That's about what I have to say. Actually, hunting was a lot of fun. It ended up just being Jeff and I Friday night, and then my dad came up on Saturday. But Jeff and I played 12 games of cribbage. I went 2-10. I thought I was going to do better because I came out the gate hot. I won the first game, and I was like, yes, all right, we're off to a good start, and this is going to be awesome. And then I proceeded to lose like 7 in a row.
That's because Jeff was just getting warmed up.
Right.
Getting spanked by the worshipful master.
However, Jeff is the one that taught me how to play cribbage and usually manages to skunk me or get a lot of muggins off of me. And I am proud to say that across those 12 games, he did not skunk me a single time. A lot of them were really close. So I am improving. But as far as the turkeys go, we did have one gobbler answering back to our calls, but he never came in. But we saw a lot of other fun stuff, a bunch of deer and stuff like that. So it was, all in all, it was a good weekend of fellowship, even if we did not come home with a turkey. And we found a new restaurant to go to that had a delicious fish fry and had a delicious venison dinner while we were up there. So I can't complain.
Did you meet up with any of the Watoma boys?
Yeah, we met up with Victor, who showered us with gifts when he showed up. We met up with him Friday. He was the one that introduced us to the new restaurant, and he brought us Amish maple syrup, which I don't even put on anything. I just drink straight out of the mason jar it came in because it's so good. And he brought us some home brews, and we went and grabbed some spring water for him to do some more home brews and stuff, and we hung out with Victor pretty much most of the night Friday night. So we had a good time with him. Always good to see the Watoma guys. Adam was down at the Midwest Conference on Masonic education, so we missed him, and Vargas was off doing whatever Vargas was doing. So
he was at my house. Well, that'd be Saturday.
Yeah, right. But he wasn't up in Watoma that weekend, so it's more so the point. So
cool.
But yeah, we had a good time with Vic. So.
Well, that's good. We don't always get to see Victor all the time anyways. I feel like we see Adam and Dave way more often anyway, so it's nice to get some Victor time.
Oh, yeah. I always like seeing Victor. So
cool. Well,
no.
Let's hit the music today, and we'll kick off a fun episode. And today we're going to be talking about the art of memory.
Loosen up your ties and roll up your sleeves. It's time for Fellowship with Matt and Andrew. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin or any other Grand Lodge or any appended body.
Cool. So today we're going to be talking about the art of memory. Matt, how would you say your memorization skills are?
I mean, they're decent, but my memorization tactic is to just beat it into my head until it sticks. So it's all based on repetition, so I would not say that I am the example of somebody to look at as to how to memorize something.
The brute force method. Yeah, I do that
Yep.
too. So what made me think of this episode was I was listening to an audio book. What's it called? It's called The Craft, and let me see here. Well, it's a history book. It's written by a non-Mason. The Craft by John Dickey. And there's some parts I like, some parts I don't like about it. Some parts where I feel like he's definitely doing a good job at uncovering some history, and other parts where his interpretations I just think are not really correct, and that's because he's not a Mason, and so I think he's looking at some things in the wrong way, but he's entitled to his opinion. But I digress. One thing that I found very interesting in this book was him talking about the origins of Freemasonry, and it was one of the more compelling theories that I've heard, which would have been out of Scotland, which has been one of the many stories we hear about the foundations of Freemasonry coming out of Scottish stonemason guilds. So what was interesting is he explains that stonemason guilds were one of the few guilds that really were not good at being guilds for most of the Middle Ages because they moved so much for work. Their work was so intermittent that they didn't really organize for a very long time until William Murray. He was a guy appointed by King James in Scotland, and if I mix up some of the people in this, it's because I don't have the source in front of me, in the 1500s. So predating the Grand Lodge of the United Kingdom by a couple hundred years. And he was set to the task of being the court architect, more or less, and working on a lot of architectural projects, building churches and stuff like that. And he organized the local Masons into lodges, and they were called Murray Lodges. And one thing that was interesting is he took what was already, you could see, passed down through these loosely knit guilds, some of their mythology, their history, stuff like that, and he added elements to them. And one of the big elements that he added on top of the 7 liberal arts and sciences was the art of memory. And it stuck out to him as being something that was essentially important to have and focus on in these lodges that were both operative and speculative.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of benefits to working on your memory, right? It's just you keep your brain active, you keep your brain engaged, you challenge yourself, you do a lot of different things. You're exercising your brain by trying to do it, right? Which may stave off some of the things we see a lot later in life, like Alzheimer's, dementia, stuff like that. If you're constantly using that tool, and you got to work it out like any other muscle, right? And as much as my memory has been worked out, if you ask my wife, she'll tell you it's just as bad as it always was.
Selective memory.
Yeah, right. Very selective.
Well,
I've been working on a new part for shrine ceremonial for I don't know, a month, and I got to do it this Saturday. And finally, at the point where I was able to do it cold tonight, which was great. But if you asked me to do the EA charge right now, I would need to refresh it because it's been over a year since I've done it.
I'm trying to remember. I wonder if hold on. I think are they Shaw Lodges? And I'm saying Murray instead. Hold on. I got to make sure, or else this is going to destroy my entire piece here.
It'll destroy your integrity.
I can't have that happen.
You have no integrity. Come on now.
Hold on. Why am I thinking it's Shaw Lodges instead of Murray Lodges? I could be mixing up my names. Found it now.
There's 3 of our listeners that'll care if you get it right.
I know, and I don't want to let them down. It was William Shaw, not William Murray. I don't know where I got Murray from. The William Shaw Lodges, who worked for King James the Sixth of Scotland. I meant Shaw Lodges. So before I get crucified, I meant William Shaw. Okay, now I can move forward. I just had to get that right because in my head I went, I don't know where I got Murray from. Regardless, so
somebody was already screaming at their phone that you got it wrong. So
I don't want to lose my integrity. But so what was interesting is he put such an emphasis on including memorization work and the art of memory and the techniques used for the art of memory included in his lodges, my first thought was, this must be smart in an age when literacy is not a guarantee, especially amongst craftsmen, to say like, hey, not only is this good for memorizing our histories and our rules and regulations, but also memorizing work orders, things you have to do, and memorizing trade secrets. And so I think in an operative sense, there's a very practical purpose that this was so important to the early Masons.
Well, 100%. I mean, I've worked in a number of career fields where being able to have, like, retained knowledge, let's put it that way. The ability to retain knowledge was very important, you know, not necessarily memorization, like, this is exactly what the book says what a T-bone is, but like the ability to explain to somebody what a T-bone is, or the ability, going all the way back to high school if you want, the ability to, when I was working at Stein's Gardens and Gifts, the ability to go, yeah, this is the chemical you want to kill that particular plant that's in your yard or something like that. And that ability to retain knowledge and have it accessible on the fly just makes life a whole lot easier.
And on top of that, if there was no literacy and you had rules, regulations, and various things, you would want them remembered word for word instead of just like basics, right? Like when you look at the religious poem and the various other, you know, proto-Masonic texts that are kind of rolling around, it would be to the benefit of the lodges trying to standardize by encouraging perfection in memory. And what's interesting too is, so William Shaw was really interested in the Romans, like every guy has been ever since they fell, right? And this was right in the era where you were starting to get access to those texts. And in one of the texts, it was talking about, I think it's Architectura. I forget what it's called, but I think that might have been the text where they were talking about it was more or less romanticizing architects and builders and saying that a builder should be a scholar as well. And so I think that kind of inspired William Shaw to be like, we need to be doing these higher arts, several liberal arts, but also the art of memory. And what's interesting with some of the reasoning is, being a man from the Renaissance era or around there and being influenced by it, they were really looking back at Roman techniques for memorization, which is what they would use as a part of rhetoric for memorizing speeches and doing that type of work. And being able to memorize well-crafted speeches was considered like a really good skill in Rome for a politician, any person in the higher class to be able to do something like that. So I think he drew on that as well. And so I thought it was cool because it means for, I guess, what year is it right now? For like 500 years, Masons from the get, who were becoming operative speculative, were focusing on the importance of memorization. And I think sometimes we think it's trivial, but it's been there from our foundation.
Well, you know, and going back to one of your earlier points, I had a little bit of a light bulb go off. You know, you were talking about the lack of literacy, right? And I think we don't maybe focus as much on the importance of memorization these days because pretty much everybody has the ability to read, right? So you can always look, and we have these lovely phones that we carry around, so you can always look something up. But more importantly, when you were passing stuff down mouth to ear, we all played telephone when we were a kid. And we all know that the message went from A to Z by the time it got to the last person. And so a focus on memorization would definitely dictate that you could pass down stuff and make sure it would be consistent, right? Because you didn't want trade secrets or anything like that to go from being A to being X, right? You wanted them to stay consistent. So focusing on memorization was very important in a time of limited literacy.
Absolutely. And you know what's also interesting? Let's throw another spin into that. So I think that'd be the very practical side. There's also an esoteric side that people were interested in this time period. So William Shaw being interested, pulling techniques like the memory of Loki, he would have been pulling from people like Julio Camilo and Giordano Bruno, who they were saying that the art of memory was a moral discipline because it required focus, discipline, and the ability to basically capture something that could be considered divine and hold it within one's mind. And so, I mean, some of them went as far to say, like, the art of memory was like creating like a inner temple. And so I think that a lot of those old Masons are pulling from that, and the ability to take a philosophy or ritual and store it in a internal temple as a transformative process is what they would kind of say, that through memorizing more and more of the work, you're integrating it into your brain. And the better you do at that, the more it's in your psyche, and that has transformative properties.
Well, I would 100% agree with that. I mean, memorizing the charges and having at least portions of them, maybe not verbatim, available at will still, even though I haven't done any of them in a while. I'm able to reference those charges in a conversation. They're in my mind. I can speak on them, and I have the ability to go, hey, don't forget about this part of it if I see somebody screwing up, because it's there, it's readily available, it's knowledge I know. It also helps with your delivery when you have it down that absolutely solid, that you don't have to think about what you're saying, so you can put more emphasis into your delivery of it.
And I think that, you know, we've had Chocolate come on and talk about how it's important not just to memorize, you have to understand as well. Mm-hmm. So I do think that I agree actually a lot with what they're saying, but I think it requires education and the understanding of the why and the meaning, and then the internalization of our symbols within your mind. And I think when you have both of those things, when you're about to air or there's something coming up, you're able to recall word for word what it says, and you know what it means. And I think that can be like, you know, pretty influential. I think it can really come to mind quickly the more effort you put in. So more or less what I'm kind of trying to say is the memorization work, which I've heard people online and various things bemoan and being like, oh, I didn't know I needed this, is kind of essential to the process that we do when it comes to making a good man better. I think it is one of the Masonic tools in the Masonic tool belt. Like what we're saying, the in the past episode, the hidden symbols, or the remember what we were talking about where we said the non-spoken symbols or whatever?
No, I don't remember.
Remember how we were saying, what was it? It's like the reading between the line symbols. It's an unspoken symbol that's in Masonry. I think the tool of memorization is one of those. Hold on, the baby's awake again. 1 second. Man, he just won't go to sleep. But yeah, anyways.
Yeah, that happens. No, on your point, though, much like we talk about public speaking being a byproduct of Masonry, memorization is one of those byproducts that none of us ever realized we needed necessarily in our life. But once we started down that path of being able to memorize things, I have personally have found my memory for a whole bunch of different things is a lot better. Whether it be my memory of Wisconsin Masonic Code, or, you know, various things, what a conversation I had with somebody, you know, and being able to pull up some of that stuff on recall is sometimes a very useful tool. And like I said earlier, you know, exercising the brain allows us to be better in other parts of our lives. So I feel like memorization is one of those things that we sometimes overlook that we shouldn't, because much like public speaking, it is a skill you can gain from Freemasonry and therefore improve yourself.
And with it, like, I think some people like to think it's a old byproduct, like a one of the that's how we've always done it isms, and they're like, we need to make this easier, we need to constantly water down this memorization work. People think it's too hard, but I think that as symbolic or as speculative Masons, I think that is really what we're building. Besides building ourselves as men, we're building an internal temple. And so taking on the work of memorizing is you're working in symbolic stone within your own mind to put a temple in there. And from there, that ideally that spiritual temple is what kind of helps you improve as a man, on top of all the other things we've talked about in this podcast as various byproducts that do. I think that's a key element of Masonry. So it's not really just something that's dumb that we do and there's no reason for it and we just suffer because we have to do it. Yeah, I think it's important. I think it should be hard, and I think it teaches you stuff.
It does. It does very much so teach you stuff. It should be moderately difficult, right? You don't want it to be a roadblock for people to Freemasonry. So moderately difficult, right? And I had another point that I was going to go down, and since I brought up my other first 2 points, I forgot what that other one was. I should have brought that one up first. Yeah, it's been a long night.
Solo dadding it.
Right.
But yeah, and so I think with us agreeing that it is important and it serves a real and tangible purpose in Masonry, I thought it'd be fun to go through some techniques outside the brute force technique, which I will allow you to briefly explain your process, that would have been the traditional methods, at least one of them for sure, one of the traditional methods used in those proto lodges back in the day to teach the art of memory. So tell me your method, Matt.
So I basically, start at the beginning and read along with what I need to out of the cipher, obviously, and get to a point where I feel like I'm competent, and start. But I always start at the beginning. So I will always start at the beginning. I will make it as far as I can, then I will review the rest. And I will go back to the beginning and I will keep doing it, and go back to the beginning and keep doing it. Personally, my thought is if you can nail the first 75% of it and you have it completely committed to memory, that's going to give you the confidence to carry through the last 25% of it, where you might start getting a little iffy on it. But my method is all repetition, 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 repetition. And I have heard guys, and I don't know how they do this because it would throw me for a loop, but I have heard of people that memorize it from the end back to the beginning.
Weird.
By the brute force method, so that this way they know that they're going to finish strong. But for me, memorizing it backwards wouldn't work. I just need to start at the beginning and pound it all into my head until the whole thing exists there.
So what I do is I basically use a combination of that for some parts, and then I use the other two methods that we're going to talk about in a little bit here, which is the method of Loki and the peg system. I use those two, which we'll talk about a bit, for larger parts. But what I will do is I will start at the first chunk until it feels strong, and then I'll chain to the next part, and I'll start like 2 sentences above where I'd already memorized, and then I'll kind of chain down the list, the repetition, and I will use that for where it's like action-reaction parts, right? Like someone says this, you say that. Someone says this, you say that. I don't really need a very advanced system to remember those lines, but the interesting one that I do use for, like, for example, a charge or for obligations is the method of Loki. And the method of Loki would have been memory practice that was very likely taught in those proto lodges. Came around the same time period. It was kind of like it was the fad. And basically the way the method works, so you use your imagination to imagine locations, because the theory is, and it's been proven, that your brain is really good at remembering locations. For survival reasons, it makes sense.
Right.
So you don't get lost.
So it's similar to the memory palace concept.
Memory palace is the rebranding of the same method. Okay. Memory of Loki is the old name for it. Memory palace is the modern one. And you create a space, and it could be, usually they recommend for beginners, use your home, because you're going to be better at imagining it, your lodge room or something like that. Or you can make up a fictitious one. You just imagine it as rooms. I used to use my house for this method, but I use a fake room just because it's easier, that I can make sterile rooms in my mind, that I don't have to have weird stuff in the way to put stuff on. But essentially what you do is you break up what you're trying to memorize and you represent it symbolically and you put it in that room. So I'll generally draw a sketch. And so, like, let's say if I want to say, God, what is one that I like to use? It's, now I'm on the microphone, I can't think of it. It's like be certain or something. And it's a be sir. So it's a bee and a top hat. So a bee sir. And so I'll put that, and I don't use it for the full sentences. I'll use it for chunks. So I'll hook like 10 words to each image, right? So I'll put like a bee sir, a sir bee wearing a hat in one part of my room. So if you're imagining you're in a room, imagine you have shelves in front of you. I would put on the farthest left of the shelf a bee sir, and then let's say it sentence, be certain that you never forget to say this. And then the next sentence would be like, but you must go forward. I would put a butt, person's butt, because the more crude it is, the more memorable it is. I'd put that next to the bee. And each room represents a different part of the ritual. And what I've found is when you go through that, it takes a little bit of more work on the front end to prepare what you want. I can pull ritual back that I haven't studied in years, by just going to that room in my mind and seeing those cues because the words are attached to them. And I can imagine that space and have it come back. So like a good example is you could use your lodge room, for example, and in various places that make sense for parts, you could put in your mind items. And so when I get lost, I quickly pull an image up in my head. I see the butt and I go, but, and then I can catch myself and get back into the groove.
Wow. That seems insanely difficult for my brain. I can understand how that can be useful for people, but for me, that's like one of those things where I'm just like, man, that seems more difficult than me just putting in the hours and pounding it into my head.
So the pros to it is it has longer sustainable memory. So you can keep it for longer without having to go back to brute forcing. You can almost quickly just polish. So it is an investment on the front end. But what I especially like about it is the reason it was considered a spiritual practice is because you're creating a visual temple in your mind that you can walk around in, right? You can peruse through your library of stored memories, and you can simply go, all right, I'm going to walk down the hall, take a left to this room. This is my obligation room. And it's always in your brain, and you can just walk in there and go, all right, now I have it again. So you're creating like a suppository for the secrets of Masonry within your mind.
Right. No, I like it. I'd forget where the room was.
Well, so what I do is imagine there's a hall. I've changed it from being my house to just a hallway, right? And the doors are adorned with different stuff. So if, for example, let's say the obligation, I adorn it with ivy. And that's always on the left. And I usually don't have to walk through all the rooms. I just go, okay, I need to go to the ivy room. And all I do is just... basically in my mind, I just see a door with ivy on it, and I walk in, and then it's there. So it doesn't have to be as complex of you like getting lost in your own palace in your mind. It's kind of like you just sorting through your files and going, ivy room, pop in, and there's the butt. And you're like, we're ready to rock.
I would be remiss if I didn't go back to the brute force method and mention the fact that when I do like review or anything like that, or if I am learning a new part, like for conferring the EA degree, for example, I do the junior deacon's part, the senior deacon's part, the junior warden's part, and the senior warden's part. Like I review all of them at the same time. And I essentially do every single part in that degree, minus like the chaplain, because I don't have that down yet. But I do every single part as I'm going through the degree to refresh my memory on those old parts as well, or see if I still have it. So
yep, I do the same thing where it helps to like build the other parts because I think it builds a more complete picture. But yeah, I would challenge you to pick like some old part of ritual, something easy like the EA charge, and just try to do the memory palace. I think you might find it kind of fun. It would be like not something you're studying for right now because you're gonna have the pressure on, and you're just gonna want to brute force. I've done that too, where I'm like, dude, I don't have time to go through all these steps to think of this and do all that. But to be honest, like if I have time to sit down with it, I used this method when I was a fresh master mason learning my obligation, and it was huge. Like I could, and at that time I set up the scene in my old house's living room is where I put it. And even right now I can still imagine where I put all of the stupid symbols that I created. And the way you create the symbols doesn't always have to be like a rhyme or something. You could just put something that you think will jog your memory. Like if it's something about being true and faithful, you could put an image of Superman, right? And you just know what that symbol means. And that's that sentence. And when you're repeating out loud or in your head, the lines, you're imagining that image. So you're kind of just impregnating that image with whatever arbitrary words. So it's whatever symbol makes the most sense for you. It's very creative, which is kind of fun.
Right. That actually might be useful. As you know, I'm working on learning the middle chamber, the staircase lecture, and that has built-in cues as it is. So doing some sort of visualization tactic with that maybe.
Well, think about the picture lecture. Helpful. Imagine the picture lecture when you didn't necessarily have the slides. You would take those same images that you use as your cues and just put them in your mind. And that would be like the best way to do it. And that's why that tool's there. But you can imagine back in the day before slides or even before projectors, and they might try to write them in chalk on the floor or whatever it might be, that they were likely using the method of Loki to put those same types of images when they're practicing at home. They're probably not drawing it on the floor. They were probably imagining what they're going to see on the floor in their lodge room to memorize it too.
Right. No, that might be very helpful for this part. And I'm not in a hurry to learn the middle chamber lecture. It's just kind of on my list. So
I would say that I think that the reason I recommend this so much, and I like to recommend it to new candidates who are interested in trying something different, is it really feels like it connects me to Masonry because it does feel like I'm building something. Like I'm physically putting something in my mind that exists in my mind's eye as a space. And as you learn more stuff, that space gets bigger and you add more places and more stuff and it gets bigger and bigger. And it feels very speculative Masonry. But the second method, I'm not going to call it the pegging method because it sounds too ridiculous, but called the peg method.
Right. Hold on, before we get into that,
Yep.
I connected two things in my brain, which I find very interesting. So I was just recently listening to a podcast with Joe Rogan and Cameron Haynes, and they were talking about this one female ultra marathon runner. She does like those 100, 200-mile races and stuff like that. And she is known for telling people the way she does it is every time she's running one of those races, she says she's chipping away at a cave and making the room in a cave larger. Like that's where she goes in her head to avoid all the pain and everything else that's going on during that run. And I just found that very interesting.
And how monotonous it is just to be just running just in a line forever.
Right. Well, and I mean, they do mountains and trails and everything else for those, but like you need to go somewhere, right? And I just found that eerily similar to what we were just talking about, but like used in a different context.
Yeah, creating a mental space to achieve a goal where you can go at any time, no matter where you are, you can walk into that room. I mean, some people go as wild with these memory palaces. So like really nerdy memory palace people will create spaces in their mind that they will store small books in that they put in when they're really good at memorization. They'll also put in like gardens and stuff that in their mind, if they're just like, hey, I'm in an argument, they'll start to add from their library spaces that like if they're really stressed out, they have an image in their head. Once they get good at kind of the art of visualizing rooms, and they'll walk into a garden in their mind and just sit there and like stare at like flowers and birds, and it's a way for them to help calm themselves. And so the applications, once you're able to build a space in your mind, are pretty interesting. Or chip away at a cave when you're running infinite miles.
Right. Infinite miles. Right. All right. So the peg method, what do we got?
So the peg method is one that I had recently found, but I've only been experimenting with it a little. And the peg method is essentially creating hooks is kind of what it's about. And so more or less what it's used for is not forgetting what comes after what in order. So it's kind of useful for like the obligation, the I wills and I won'ts, right? What comes after what? And so the peg method is kind of strange in the way that you basically you number 1 through whatever number, and you create a list of words that you'll always have as those hooks that rhyme with 1. So it could be 1 is a bun, 2 is a shoe, 3 is a tree, 4 is a, well, I don't want to say something inappropriate. 4 is a door, 5 is God,
dude, I feel like the peg method just lends itself well to inappropriate comments.
Right. But they also say just like the memory palace, the more inappropriate or disturbing it is, the more you'll remember it. So 5 hives, 6 sticks, and you can go on with the list. And no matter what you are doing when you're trying to remember the order, you memorize what your numbering system is. 1 bun, 2 shoe, 3 tree, 4 door, 5 hive, 6 sticks, and down the list. And you rhyme something with it. And you have that as your set hooks. It's always going to be a bun. So when you're starting your sentence, you incorporate the image of a bun and then something that ties to the sentence you're trying to do. So if it was, let's make up a fake obligation. I will not eat pancakes in my pajamas. You would have a bun with like sitting in a pair of pajamas. And then if there was another I will always eat sundaes on Tuesdays, it would be a shoe filled with a hot fudge sundae.
Interesting.
And then 3 tree, it'd be I will always drink maple syrup from the can that I got it in from the Amish. And it would be a stick wearing like an Amish hat. And so the fact that you always know the order of the images, you're able to quickly say, all right, I'm on this sentence, I'm on this sentence, then I'm on this sentence, and then I'm on this one. So it's a little bit more it's very similar to the memory palace, but instead of necessarily putting in a palace, you just know what comes after a bun is a shoe. What comes after a shoe is a stick, and then you remember what you adorned that image in to make it relative. And It's really good for, I was trying it the other day, a couple of weeks ago for the Fellowcraft obligation. I used this just to remember what the order was, because sometimes I'll switch, like I'll switch them. And I found this one is actually a great intro to pre-memory palace work, because I found it a lot easier and a lot faster because you always know that you don't have to make a new image. You go, I know what all my symbols are, and you memorize them fast because they rhyme.
Right. My head hurts.
That's good.
I don't like, for me, it's just brute force. That's me though. I think these are great techniques, and I hope a lot of people learn something from this and employ them or look more into them. But yeah. I'm simple-minded, Andrew.
You're not simple-minded, and I think you should at least experiment for one small part with each of these methods, just once, to see, because as Masons, we can't just get set in our ways and be like, no. If you try it and go, I tried it just for kicks and it didn't work, you can always revert back to brute forcing. But you might find that, like, for me, the peg system, the mental hooks, made it so much. Like, I was so much less nervous because I knew I would never lose my spot, because I knew what come after the other every time very quickly. That one was a lot easier and faster to do than the memory palace, where I had to sit there and try to be creative and think of something. This was just boom, 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 boom. And it was like super helpful. And you can still, with the bun method, it basically just keeps you in order, and then you brute force it if you'd like.
Fair. All right. I might have to give it a shot.
Just try it. It's fun. The art of memory.
I feel like I'm going to confuse myself more doing it that way, but
part of the journey. But yeah, I think these techniques are important because, like we were saying, anything that can help you build confidence in your memory work, or even just you've been doing it one way for a while and you want to try something different to just spice things up, I think it can be cool and help brothers who might have, like me and you don't have memory challenges, right? But if we know someone who struggles with memory, these types of methods can be huge to give them a tool they need to start to, overcome that too.
I just want to be one of those savants that has photographic memory and basically just reads off the page that they see in their head.
Yeah, me too. But to be fair, these methods, both there's a third method that I didn't include that's about memorizing numbers and dates, and I don't want anything to do with that. And so I've never really looked at it closely, but every professional memorizer, which is apparently a sport, uses these methods in some sort of combination.
Wait, there's like memory work competitions?
They'll take a deck of cards or multiple deck of cards, shuffle them, and then memorize the order and try to see who's the best.
Wow.
I think they do other stuff too.
I did not know that existed.
Yeah, autism's weird, man. But so
YouTube it is tonight. YouTube it is.
but yeah, outside of these methods, do you think that us living like in this digital world, that maybe memory is a way of helping us kind of reclaiming our attention and our ability to focus? I kind of feel like that's how I feel about it. It's almost meditative.
I do, because I grew up in a generation that got technology later in life and adapted to technology very well. But I can still tell you my best friend's phone number from when I was 9 years old, right? Because I had it memorized, because I had to. I can still tell you my parents' old home phone number because I had it memorized, because I had to. Now, we don't have virtually any phone numbers memorized. They're just in our phone, like they're there.
You click their name.
Right. We don't have to flex that muscle ever. And I feel like Freemasonry gives us the opportunity to flex that muscle.
And I think that in the age of everything is quick and fast gratification, that everything comes so easy, having something that requires you to slow down and actually challenge yourself to use a part of your brain that is possibly underdeveloped for a lot of people at this time as they rely more and more technology, that those benefits can be hard to even quantify, is having the ability
Right.
to actually sit down and say, I'm going to just brute force this square into a circle hole, and we're going to get this in
Yep.
here, and we're going to memorize this. I think it teaches you a lot. And I do think it teaches not only discipline and focus, but I think it also I think it builds confidence when you're able to have a challenge and overcome it too.
Agreed. I mean, overcoming a challenge or, just plugging away at a challenge and doing the best you can at the end of the day is definitely a confidence builder. And we need more of those in today's world. And we need more memory work in today's world. We're letting our brains get a little mushy by just always having the information provided to us, right?
Well, and if you think about it, so like if what the Renaissance men were saying that memorizing is a way of internalizing information, if we're not internalizing any information, is that making us a little bit more mushy, like you're saying, that as
Right.
one of the methods of internalizing is having it stored in your mind. If you store nothing in your mind, like you're kind of just, you have nothing to pull from when you need to pull something in a challenging situation. So I think it's cool. I think it's helpful.
Oh, I agree. And when it comes to Freemasonry specifically, I think being able to internalize a lot of this stuff through memorization and understanding, hopefully, from that memorization. If you get to internalize the values and the principles and what you obligated yourself to and stuff, and put those into practice in your daily life.
And I mean, when it's perfectly recallable in your mind, when you're about to find yourself maybe in a situation where you might violate your obligation, it can very quickly come back to you word for word, and you go, I probably shouldn't. You know what I mean? It gives you
Right.
the ability where it's hard to be flexible and be like, I guess I had to say a thing once, and I don't really remember what it said, so I'm just going to do whatever I want to do and hope it works out. It really makes it, I think, more concrete, and it makes the building stronger in the individual Mason.
Agreed.
Cool. Anything else?
Final thoughts are brute force is the way to go. No, I'm just kidding. Do whatever works best for you would be my final thoughts on memory work.
I agree. But also, don't be afraid to test out new methods if you're curious to see. You never know. It could have some powerful effects, and it could be a very fun practice to add into your Masonic repertoire or your toolbox. But yeah, at the end of the day, do whatever works. Anyways, I think that's a good place to call it. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. And if you would like to join us on our Discord server, please do. We're in there chatting. I chat more than Matt. I'm trying to get him to chat more. If we guilt trip him enough, we can probably get him to do it.
I'm trying to hop on there more. Life's just been crazy lately.
Yeah, I know, but you're chatting in other places. You could just chat in there. But so
Whatever.
But it's a fun spot. You can find the link in our show notes. If you are interested in anything with memory work, I'll put a book that I've been reading in the show notes as well that I enjoy on memory work. So if you're really interested in picking something up, it'll be there. And make sure you follow us on, Matt, where are we?
Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And just so everybody is aware, there's been a slight rebranding to those. It's the Time for Fellowship Masonic podcast on most of those platforms now to hopefully increase our reach and our Googleability.
Googleability.
Yep.
Cool. And you can always email us at
timeforfellowship@gmail.com.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
All right. Have a good day.